Next up, we have Tom Peruzzi. He is the spokesman of the executive board and the CTO of Virtual Minds, which is an Adtech company from Germany owned by ProSiebenSat.1 Media Group. And he's responsible for the corporate strategic direction of technology provider and holistic strategic development of the whole platform portfolio. And he will now talk about the intermediaries on rough sea and what the new data world means for the Adtech industry. That means he will talk about the new challenges we all face, the European data privacy regulations and interventions. He will talk about the impact of those changes on the Adtech intermediaries and give valuable impulses how the future can look like and future technology setups of companies can look like. Tom, the stage is yours.
Good morning, everyone. So she promised me already to grill me afterwards with questions. So what I will do today is I will give you a rough idea about hypotheses we are thinking about how the data world will evolve. It's the matter of hypotheses that we can verify or falsify them, and especially people from Vienna would rather say, hey, you can just falsify them. But the thing is, those 10 hypotheses, they should be used for all of us, for all of you, not only to say something like, hey, this is crazy what Tom is doing, or he's ugly, he's insane. No, it's about making you think about what may happen or what may not happen, or will it impact you and your business, or may it not impact you on your business. It's the fact of an hypothesis that it may happen, but it must not happen. But I think it's worth thinking about a few topics. We've heard a lot about some of them already yesterday. We've heard a lot about the evolution of how lawmakers are doing. We've heard about what technology is doing. I want to first give you a rough overview of where we are standing now, and then go into topics that may appear, that may not appear, that are a little bit more obvious or not obvious. What I can say too is the 10 hypotheses I will present to you, they are in an unordered, unprioritized list. So just because I'm using them with number 1 to 10 doesn't say anything about how important they are for me or how important they may be for you. It's just a collection of hypotheses, and I hope we can afterwards get in a lot of fruitful and useful discussions. What I've learned from last year from the Heroes of Data Privacy is that it's a great space for inspiration, it's a great space for discussions, and I hope my hypothesis can support that too. So just one word about me. She said it already. I'm the speaker of the board and the CTO of the Virtual Minds Group now for 6 years. I'm in the Adtech and media space for more than 20 years. I started the first time in the last century. That's where I'm coming from, and beside that, I still do lecturing and I still do angel investments. So my background and all the hypotheses I'm talking about today comes mainly not from ChatGPT. I didn't even talk to ChatGPT about those hypotheses. It comes from talking to real humans. It comes from talkings to advertisers, it comes from talkings to colleagues, it comes from talkings to technicians, to publishers, to other intermediaries, competitors, to any kind, and even to talks which I had with people from the European Union, like for privacy regulations or for consumer protection. Why do I be able to talk to those people? Simply because I do work in a lot of regulatory topics as well. Beside everything you can read here, I'm actively, openly working in the IAB Europe. I was for a long time the chairman of the governance board. I'm still in the governance board. I'm in the steering group. And by doing so, I often have to support IAB Europe in talks with the European Union as well. So every hypothesis, which will be shown later, is somehow a mingled version of all the discussions I had in the last year. And it may not only give you some idea about what may happen, it may give you some idea about too what we are discussing within our virtual minds. I don't want to make any advertisement about us now, just to give you an understanding. We are 20 years on the market. We have grown with the whole market from traditional advertising. We even started as a banner community, and we've grown towards the programmatic world. So all our thoughts, all hypotheses we're bringing with us has been grown over the last 20 years. So this is a little bit a condensed version of everything we are coming from. Before I start with the hypothesis in general, I want to start and end with a quote. Sometimes I learned that quotes are super for presentations. No, I learned that I do read a lot, and my colleagues know me for often quoting books, often books from management or from technology, or a lot about innovation. That's really one of my favorite things, but I do read a lot of traditional literature as well. And whenever something pops up while reading, I think, oh, wow, this is really worth for my business. So I think it was Klaus saying yesterday, you can learn so much from what happened already in the past. So I have brought Hermann Hesse with me. Opponents often need each other more than friends, because without the wind, there are no mills. What I want to say with that is that if we don't have friction, if we don't have enemies, competitors and stuff like that, there will most likely be no need for change. There will be no need for innovation. Without change and without innovation, it may not need me, and it may not need some of you. And without innovation, without friction, there will be no future development of human beings. And so all the hypotheses we are building are even on top of hypotheses which hopefully are somehow aligned with the market. Because a hypothesis which just works for you, it's a nice try, and maybe it's a little bit something like Alice in Wonderland, but it's more about hypotheses which should work for the whole market as well. And some of the hypotheses, I can promise, you will smile. Some of them, maybe you will say something, this is obvious, or some of them you will say, oh, I totally disagree. As said, it's totally fine. It's about making you think, and it's about telling you what the whole scenery in Germany, in Poland, in Scandinavia, in Austria, or in the European Union is thinking about, is talking about. What are their threats, or where do others see opportunities? We have seen that yesterday, and it's just what I want to not talk about. We've seen that with all the different things that happened, and thinking about the mobile traffic as well, that when we talk about Adtech and tracking and stuff like that, as of today, we're not talking about the majority anymore in the traditional sense. And what we have seen too, and you have heard a lot about that yesterday, and you will hear a lot about that today too, is that there is a plentiful and beautiful sum of technology popping up which should help you in the post-cookie world. And no, I don't want to talk about the post-cookie world now. I just want to say, I do understand and I do hope that we don't have to, I can talk about that for hours, by the way, so if you want, but it's just, I don't want to talk about data clean rooms. There's Martin coming afterwards. He's a great expert in that. There are other experts talking about solutions for post-cookie worlds and stuff like that. There's JENTIS coming with their solution today, and I hope I will learn more about that. And there's different solutions out there. The solution space is already great. I want to talk, all my thoughts and all my thinkings I want to share with you is about what else. There's no hypothesis about the evolution of a data clean room or stuff like that. There's no hypothesis about something like that. So it's a few others. And why is it a few others? Because I think it is really solved. And just to give you one example, if we talk about identifiers and if we talk about our businesses, you see that the number of identifiers used, which are not third-party cookies, it's already immense. And don't take this picture too serious. It's 3 weeks old. If I would ask my colleagues for now, then it would be around 5 or 10 points higher. But you see, it's already there. So I don't want to talk about something which exists already, which is running already, where people sometimes still talk about it, sometimes people think about using it, but a lot is already going on. So what will I talk about? It's about what may happen. And the first thing is that somehow when you talk especially to lawyers and to the European Union guys, it's that we get out of that regime of legitimate interest and stuff like that is possible. We do see more and more that the explicit consent is king. And explicit consent not only by, I have a CMP which somehow asks for consent, but really in the means of the GDPR. How that may look like, still open. But whenever we think about how do we want to build our business case, how do we want to build our models, this is definitely a safe bet to take it for granted that whatever comes next in the next couple of months or years will be most likely based on explicit consent, which is really freely given, which is stored, which is archived, which is regularly repeated to be asked and stuff like that. Why is that necessary? Because consent is king. It may reduce complexity in the long run, and it hopefully may reduce the number of open auction partners, which I would at least call dirty. And so this is the first hypothesis I want to share with you, that everything we do see, and we do see some drafts of legislative initiatives and stuff like that, and whenever we see something like that, there's always marked that explicit consent is the main driver for action in the future. So whoever is running on legitimate interest, and for some reason, and sometimes you even have to do that, or you were used to do that, please take in consideration that this is future-proof for the next 2 to 3 or 5 years or whatever. Yes, still someone may say, hey, what if I don't get a consent? Can I do anything? There will be some kind of exceptions, but the general driver will be the explicit consent only. The next thing is I wanted to share with you, when I was invited in different groups. It was Policy and the European Consumer Protection Board and stuff like that. What we do see now with that emergent, with a dramatic increase of CMPs and cookie banners and all those nice layers trying to explain you why exactly they need some consent or some information from you, we may have solved a GDPR issue, but a new topic popped up. And I remember last year when I was invited to an IAB Austria event, as I once said, when you have learned the GDPR, the next thing you should learn is data protection law. And I would say this is even now more important to understand, because what happened now is that consumer protection popped up saying something like, how should anyone understand why I should choose between 300 intermediaries? Or how should anyone without any legal background understand what a publisher or a retailer is writing when asking for content? And why is it, and we have the discussions with approve and deny and stuff like that, but it's much more about that immense, they call it the fatigue of the banner fatigue and stuff like that. So there is a lot of things going on which may push us towards thinking, how can we make it more simple? How can we make it more easy to use? And one solution, which is at least already anchored in the German law, that's the personal information management systems, where you have identity and access management somehow controlled by another body, where you then can simply say, I generate trust virtual minds, or I generate distrust virtual minds, and then it's set automatically and stuff like that. So most likely, we will see whenever the legislation has done their work, and they are now in Germany, they're discussing now for more than a year how exactly the framework should look like for such a management system. But what I want to tell you is that the CMP layers are a little bit under fire. Not for legal reasons with regards to GDPR, they are a little bit under fire because of their complexity, because of user protection, because of user privacy preserving topics. And I'm not an evangelist, I'm a technologist. I just can say, be prepared that maybe you should consider how you can manage that properly. The next thing is, and that's for me a totally positive message, is with the invention or with the advent of the Data Act, there's a new opportunity growing, a European data market, a European data market being owned and originated and regulated and controlled by Europeans. That sounds really good. And the question is, how can we as Europeans make sure that we are the first ones taking advantage of the European data market? Because it shouldn't be the idea that the European Union does something good for the tech giants of the world. It should be a market which is for European companies, and for European companies meaning for data providers, for data users, data intermediaries. So the question on that hypothesis is not, oh, what's happening to me? It's rather, how can I prepare to be one of the first ones participating in that market, creating extra value for my customers or creating extra revenue for my company? So whenever you hear something about the Data Act, be prepared, listen carefully and think about, or at least build that hypothesis, what can I do on top of it? Is there some kind of extra revenue? We are all searching for extra revenue. We shouldn't be always in defend mode. This is definitely something where we really can think aggressively on how can we go forward. Another thing, and yeah, worth being discussed is, even if we know that now, I think it was on Monday, that Google announced that they will start dropping 1% of the traffic with third-party cookies in January 2024. There are a lot of people out there still not believing that the cookie will be really killed. I really thought about bringing that hypothesis or not, for a simple reason, because we have seen it so often that whenever Google said, we give you another 9 months, then everyone stopped thinking about it and stopped working about an alternative solution. So this is not an hypothesis for you to lean back and do something else, this is just a question, how do I prepare myself and how to react if Google keeps on with the third-party cookie? Should I then somehow do it as I did it before, even if it's just representing 20% of the world anymore? Or do I trust my alternatives, which I have built up, and stop always waiting for a gatekeeper to do something good for me? So really think about how you want to treat with that. The next is the DSA or the DMA will control large techs, but mainly kill smaller ones. We do see that day by day. We have seen all the great news about the DSA and the DMA, and I generally like the idea. But what happened is that the lawmakers didn't think about this as a connected system. And a connected system means whenever you do something on that point, some action happens there as well. And that's, for example, there's that often used paragraph, DSA paragraph 26, with something like you should know who is paid for the ad, who was the provider of the ad, and why did you be selected to see the ad and stuff like that. That's not something that's only affecting Google. Because Google may present the ad, they may provide the infrastructure for sending the ad over to you, but there are companies like mine or there are other companies out there maybe bidding for that ad and then delivering the bid and delivering the ad. And so whenever they do something which may control the big ones, the smaller ones get controlled as well, to the burden that we don't have a 5 or 10,000 engineers. Nobody in Europe has. So what's even an effort for Google is even much more an effort for the whole industry in order to comply to a law which is not built for us. So there is risk included that the smaller ones will die when Google starts putting pressure on the whole ecosystem to fulfill their law needs. Then, and that's even a tricky one, and that's maybe, the Adtech industry somehow was a little bit dirty in the past, and there are still a lot of people in there who liked it. And so we have seen it so often. For example, when you think about that TCF DPA thingy, that people came up with the idea to use the TCF string as an identifier. That was one of the main reasons for the APD to switch in there. And we do see that now too. Whenever we become more and more concrete with the help of AI on interests, on not only interests, on interests, on affinities, and stuff like that. And when you start sorting that always in the same way, people came up with the idea then the sort order can become an identifier. And so it may happen by accident that just because technologies are always, on the one hand side, pushing for the impossible, and on the other hand, we are a little bit lazy. So when we have found an order, we use that order forever. But it may happen that, for example, that order may be misused as an identifier, and then it's misused as an identifier. It's at the end identifiable data, and it's becoming PII. Or on the other hand side, it's often thought that if an AI engine can conclude who you are, then there is a very interesting imbalance between is it still segment-wise enough, or is it already becoming private data? So there's discussion out there about where the limit is between this is just an affinity or interest information, or this is getting closer to becoming PI. It's a reminder. That's a little bit of a vague hypothesis, but when we see how fast technology evolves, it's one that is quite possible, especially when thinking about how people behaved in the past. One of the last ones is that advertising will become decomplexed. So when we think about advertisement, Lou said it already, 1995 was the start. Until 1995, a lot of those mechanisms still work. Piggybacking, and a JavaScript loading, a JavaScript loading, a JavaScript loading, and a JavaScript, having hookabug tags and stuff like that. So it's a very complex world, which is somehow uncontrollable by the ones who should control it or who have the legal order to apply, who are obliged to control it. But still there's a lot of money in, so it's a little bit a system in itself, and everyone is waiting for one cutting it off and making it and decomplexing it. The decomplexing would be to the benefit of all of us. It would make measurement easier. Maybe you don't need 5 measurement partners for one bid anymore. It would make the whole delivery easier. Technology costs would decrease, and the publisher would fully be able to go for what he is obliged to. But as long as there's money in, there's always pressure in making it running. But now with all the, and that's definitely for me a positive aspect of law, with that pressure of law, even that kind of dirty scripts may divert, maybe not in 2 months, but hopefully in 6 or 12 months. And another one is that when we see what kind of pressure is put on publishers today, we do see that poor models, so either let's pay with cash or pay with data or however you want to call them, that they will keep on emerging for very good reasons. There's the reason that you have the choice, then when you go for the model, you're in a contract way, so there are a lot of good legal reasons. The bad side of it is, for intermediaries like us, we like advertisement on the one hand side, and it's for the freedom of information too. But what we currently see is that somehow publishers often feel pushed in going towards such a model to be a little bit more on the safe side. So it's the question of whether this is to the benefit of all of us or not. And then, and I hope at the end I'm asking you for all of those 10, by the way, but I didn't mention that before. The last one is that new standards may appear. And there's one already up there, which is one PCA. So with the advent of identifiers and with the advent of identifiers in the programmatic chain, the ecosystem learned that we need more control over the whole value chain. We need more control over the chain from the publisher to the last advertiser, to everyone who was involved. And you can imagine that somehow works easier in a private marketplace setup or stuff like that. When you think about an open auction and making an open auction, which is by definition open, controllable, it's a tricky thingy. So we do see already things like one PCA popping up, and there will be more standards popping up in order to fully be compliant to law and to be on the safe side, especially for publishers who invoke it. And the last one is, that's a little bit, that's like the first, one of the first ones, the full market fragmentation we do currently see with new identifiers popping up, different solutions in the post third-party cookie world popping up and stuff like that. That market fragmentation especially helps the large platforms because they offer a simple solution, a one-stop shop, there everything is included, while the open web is becoming more and more complex and more fragmented. And I think it's to the benefit of all of us, and it's a little bit something which I really urge you and ask you for assistance. We can only all work together on the open web. We can only all work together in order to make the open web work for the next 10 years too. And in order to get over that fragmentation, we all have to put in a little bit more energy in order to go over that step, get rid of the third-party cookie, and then go into a new age with new kind of identifiers and stuff like that. But before, we have to live with that fragmentation and get the best out of it. So these are my 10 hypotheses. I hope they were of interest to you. I hope some of you were new to you. I hope some of you made you think. And as I started with a quote, I want to end up with a quote, and maybe it may help us, especially for the time now with the loss of the third-party cookie and with the new world of targeting and stuff like that, is Goethe once said in Faust, "Him I love that longs for the impossible." I think that's something that we are all used in the Adtech industry now for 30 years, and hopefully we are used to it for the next 30 years as well. So thank you. Whenever she wants to ask me a question, or when you want to ask me a question, feel free.
Thank you, Tom Peruzzi. That was a very, very insightful talk and a lot of hypotheses to think about. Before I ask my question, does anyone in the audience have a question or want to challenge one of the hypotheses we just saw? Don't be shy, I know it's early. Yes.
I know you. No. Now comes the trickier part for me.
Thank you very much, Tom. I really appreciate, I think, everyone, this kind of presentation, that you really share some future stuff. I'm working for a CMP. I always have problems because I think, and there's some other CMPs as well in the room, we are not working on consent solely anymore. Yeah, I would say we are working on a privacy experience. Yeah, and you can maybe say we are privacy experience platforms. However, that we look in the future, that's one thing. And what we see, and I think this is very interesting. You mentioned, I think, decomplexation. Yeah, I speak here about the vendors and especially the piggybacking. So I think, I mean, that's a problem. Yeah. For me, the question is to you: who are the stakeholders that can push these directions? Are there companies, young companies, old companies, big companies, industry associations? Who do you think will be the leaders to lead the decomplexation, a difficult word for that?
I think some of that decomplexing comes from legal pressure, and that's somehow totally okay, because it's not complex because a technician made it complex. It's complex because it follows a commercial rule. And, you know, no publisher is now, nobody's throwing gold on publishers, and even advertisers. They all have to take care on how to best use their money in order to send over the message to their customers. So there is some kind of price sensitivity in there, and when some model seems to work, everyone is trying to make use of that model as long as they can, for good reason, because it worked. You have your KPIs, you have your model, you have your processes, you know how to report, you know how to work with it, you know how to live with it. And then you have the publisher. They have to rely on the money because, you know, they don't produce gold anymore. And so as long as there's a chain of, we get a good money and we have a really good process structure and we know at what cost we can buy interest, action, or whatever, there's no interest from an advertiser or a publisher. But now with the pressure from the legal side, things start moving. But as this is some kind of really good lived processes for 20, 30 years, there's a lot of reluctance in the system. Even with us, you know, we're used to that kind of models too. We don't like them. Sometimes we even hate them because it's really, for an ad server or for an SSP, it's tricky too to still follow all those rules. But at the end, everyone is still making good money on it. But with the pressure now from the law, and there's really, I would say there's enough pressure already there. So whenever there's a lawmaker in, so I don't want to have more pressure on the system. But so I think it starts moving. So the first steps are already done. But as you know, as such systems, they're so super huge. It's not an Austrian thingy or a German thingy. It's a European thingy. How to deal with it. So it may take a little bit longer.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else? Yes.
First of all, thank you very much. That was very insightful. I would like to ask if you can say a few words on German PIMs. So how do you see that going forward? Is it going to fly? Is it going to take longer? Is it going to work out at all?
I think that's one of, normally I would say is Achim Schlosser here, but he isn't. No. So I was in some of those groups discussing that law, and I'm in, how is it called, the Beirat of the NetID. So I think I'm quite close to it. The thing is, the lawmakers are still in the making about the exact rules. And they have to fulfill the interests of very different partners, because there's a PIM coming from a company like a NetID, who is primarily an identifier. And then there are others, CMPs could pop up with an idea of becoming a PIM. Google, as a tech company with having the logins already, could come up with the idea of having a PIM solution. So there are a lot of different stakeholders who may have interest in, and that makes the discussion about how exactly must the rule set look like in order to fulfill the law for being a PIM? How exactly should that look like? And that discussion is ongoing, and it's really, it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of passion, and it's often slower than you would hope for, and sometimes you're losing confidence, and then and it's not only me losing confidence, and so you have that kind of endless loops of discussion sometimes. But I do think that all the signs we see now is that within the next 6 months, we hope for good signals, and so that it's really progressing, because there's a real demand for progress.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
All right. Anyone else? Because otherwise it will...
You promised to grill me, so...
I see you look already grilled. So I will let you refuel. And thank you very much, Tom Peruzzi.
Thank you.